make something clear again. Okay, the world gets worse because there's three categories of people. Some that do very bad things, and as long as they keep getting away with it, it continues and gets worse. Then there are rare, rare, rare good people. You can put Greta in there. But most are neutral. So, for example, I nod or smile or whatever at a very toxic lady here. She's just a very, some people call her the Tasmanian devil. She's a bitter, nasty drunk. I mean, I've seen her sometimes friendly, even with me once. But most of the time, she's nasty. I don't know why she calls me asshole or nasty words most of the time because she's not well, and I've already said this is an official complaint I gave to my landlord months ago. Said, why am I treated like this? I barely know or interacted with this lady. And of course, for him to do something, he'd have to not be in the neutral category. He's definitely not in the good category, and he's also in the bad category. And I'm not saying I'd put him in the same category as Netanyahu as a bad person, but he's definitely more in the bad than the neutral because he engages in some of these lateral violence behaviors in front of others. So he's role modeling that it's okay, right? And so that's not neutral, right? So my neighbor that I've always had good relations with, she asked me to help her with something in her apartment once. We've always been chatty when we see each other. She's seen me give first aid to one of the other neighbors in the hallway here. So when the other nasty lady calls me a-hole, for no apparent reason, and she just ignores it and keeps her communication because they're having a somewhat civil one, then that's a neutral person helping, to devolve our species, right? And it's the same thing what happened in Germany with the Nazis. Is good people changed. Good people were barely present. They barely are in our species. Barely. It's like not even 1% of our species are good people. Most, it's 99.9 neutral. Except, maybe depending how we define bad is. Okay, there's some percentages growing there that can't possibly at all be neutral. So when Nazis started doing bad things and the Germans that were neutral crossed the street or looked the other way or said, that'll pass, then it devolves us. It devolves us all and it creates these devolutions. CBC says with everything going on in the world, and yet they never talk about the human condition. They believe, for example, that if Trump puts the right pressure on the right person in the right way in the right order, we'll have peace. And he'll deserve a peace prize. It's ridiculous because he's taking money away out of things that helps victims over generations that were involved in war. He doesn't understand the concept of future generations or the psychological development or physical development. So all of the young children in all the different parts of the world, not just Gaza, that may survive, but that survived through a part of their development that was compromised, is they'll need supports, right? It's part of the peace process to not just stop pulling the trigger, but making things right, including trauma healing, because the Zionists are, they're using what happened to their people to do it worse, right? And to see other people as animals or enemies, including children that have, barely just begun their physical and psychological development as, either targets or casualties of war. And that's very, very inhuman, right? And it's insulting to animals to say that other animals would do this. So Netanyahu and his Zionist freaks, and Trump, who kind of supports it, and our own government, who allow, let's call our government neutral for what the general population knows, but really there are people in our government and elites in business that are bad guys, right? Because they have the power to say, hey, that's not okay. And you got to wonder, well, what if something happens with your kid? Are you going to have the ability to say, hey, that's not okay? And what if it's too late at that point, right? Because the people that are worse than you are now controlling everyone through fear and, through their finger ready on the trigger. And that's what we've never learned. We've never learned from past wars. We've never reached peace when you guys think there was peace. It was only a temporary pause of pulling triggers while the next war that was going to be worse was building. So again, a country that sells weapons and that may its leader get like a Nobel Prize for doing one simple thing too late that wasn't even comprehensive enough, and that incorporates none of what happens after this devastating war, and that he's cutting the supports that his country was giving to remedy. Although, again, I got to say, and remember, I gave counseling lessons to people in Uganda working with refugees, and they had no clue what even the basic counseling skills were, and they were working with the traumas of refugees. So you might be able to feed them and give them medicines which benefit, capitalists that enter this humanitarian aid industry, but you are never going to give them the trauma healing. And here I try to give trauma healing to Indigenous or First Nations communities, and they don't want it. They prefer victimizing me instead, and they feel justified as if I had me or my ancestors, any responsibility in what happened to theirs. And what if what happened to theirs was them being neutral, was then trusting when you shouldn't trust, because when you don't trust, you have to say, hey, that's not okay. And hey, we are not going to trust you anymore. We're going to take care of anybody that comes here without our permission, and it's going to be bad for you.